Hey everybody, welcome back to your favorite media response show, X is for Show, and today is Comics Wednesday. As always, you can find the channel at X is for Show, and my soch, you can find me over at Nico Action, that's NICOACTION.
You can find me at TK Elemental.
And I'm your producer, Kevo. You can find me over in the corner, and you can find me on the socials at Kevo Reilly.
And you know what I just found out while we were doing this, because I always tweet the announcement that we're live. And so I was on Twitter. Vinnie Jones declined to come back for Deadpool and Wolverine because he said it's such a drama putting that suit on. This is the guy who played Juggernaut, for everybody who does not know who he is, because he is not anybody.
And he did the problematic I'm the Juggernaut bit.
Well, it wasn't problematic. He just sucked at it.
Well, I mean, I'm the Juggernaut bitch is actually problematic by nature as a meme.
Sure.
But, So,
interesting.
Anyway, that's just, we're talking comics. That's comics news, I think.
We got to break in. Ali Galactic. Ali Galactic said, can we please leave X-Men for the end? And I know it's not in the order, but
yeah, that's okay. I actually, Ali, it's funny that you say that, because originally it was at the end, but I was like, we got to get him in early with the big stuff. But I'm cool to wait. Yeah, totally.
Well, then while we're at it, let's talk something X-Men related for a minute.
Oh yeah, we got some stuff.
First of all, I am at all times trying to be your fuckable gym coach Bumblebee, I guess, lately with the amount of black and yellow. But I also think that the nature of cash grab stunts at the big two is complicated right now. But I don't mind a big giant size Marvel event like they're doing right now. I love that one went to Miles. I love that one goes to Spider-Gwen. They're not giving these to people who don't deserve them. So when one comes along that just seems ill thought, I'm really confused. They've announced X-Men number 700 is also X-Men number 35. But there's no metric by where that's logical. X-Men is one, like seriously, and it sounds silly to people who maybe don't get it, but like Uncanny X-Men is one book and X-Men is another, the way Detective Comics is one book and Batman is another. And both of these titles as separate things, Uncanny X-Men and X-Men, have celebrated separate milestones. This should have been like X-Men 400, not Uncanny X-Men 700.
And like you and I were talking about, you could potentially at one point have said Uncanny is adds to the original issues of X-Men that came out in the 60s, before they started doing Uncanny X-Men. But in the 90s, once Adjectiveless and Uncanny X-Men release as separate titles, they really go in entirely separate directions. Uncanny, it really does become the legacy title and kind of the inheritor of a classic X-Men vibe, where Adjectiveless becomes kind of the leaner, meaner, we can shuffle it around a little bit and do things with it. But like X-Men became X-Men Legacy at one point.
And New X-Men.
Yeah, thank you. And New X-Men as well, while Uncanny was doing entirely different things. So it's just really, it's a bummer, because for one thing, this Larraz piece is gorgeous. And it's a beautiful send-off to Krakoa. It's kind of non-diegetic. These characters would not all be together like this, I don't think, unless this is teasing something especially cool that I do not believe it is. But it's just a gorgeous little piece that he did. Larraz has been so identified with this era. It's so great. And then to see it touting something that just feels like a mix of lies and inaccuracy, I don't know what to do with that.
And like, I've seen some really interesting, so sometimes I see an article come up and I'm like, you guys used an AI to write that. And sometimes I come across Twitter feeds and I'm like, who fed this Twitter feed nothing but insult comics and anal retentive IT people?
Listen, I write my own Twitter feed. Thank you.
Well, I've seen a number of people being like, the disrespect shown to all of Wolverine by having Jean and Scott not with him.
Oh, yeah.
And then I've also seen the disrespect shown to Jean and Scott by placing Wolverine ahead of them. And then I've seen the disrespect to Emma Frost that she is next to Mystique. Then I've seen the disrespect to Mystique that she's so far back. I want to be like, okay, but like also, if you're saying that where a person is placed is their importance, how the fuck is Forge ahead of Mr. Sinister? Like, people are...
The disrespect to Moira McTaggart, who spent all of that time skinning her ex-boyfriend alive so she could wear that skin and look very fancy, and now he's just up in the corner flying around with his regular skin on, like that skin wasn't physically removed from his body? Disrespectful.
1 Million Mutants March. It's time. I do also think that there is something horrible about the Orcus folk being in this image. I do think there's something a little horrible about it because like everybody looks so happy, and then there are their genocidal monsters.
Yeah,
and it's not my favorite.
For me, that's the thing where I'm like, that this makes it entirely non-diegetic, not in continuity.
So now it's Super Mario Brothers 3 opening title screen.
Blammo. This is all the actors that are in the play that is X-Men comics that we read, walking off stage having done a fantastic production. And I will keep that mindset because otherwise, what are we doing here? And I'm already not willing to compromise on critiquing the fact that X-Men number 35 is in no way Uncanny X-Men number 700. Just is not. So I won't criticize two parts of this. I'll just stick to the one.
It's just like a DVD is not a radio. It's like, I recognize how there's similar ways to experience media. They're just not the same. One started in the 1960s and one started in the 1990s, and they're not the same. And you can like indica bullshit me as hard as you want until you're a sativa that the Uncanny X-Men started as X-Men in the first place. But, you know, then get rid of books. Just anthologize.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. This one is weird because of that, because of the fact that it was originally X-Men. But again, like I said, there was no X-Men book while Uncanny X-Men was running from having taken over for that initial X-Men title until the 90s, and then they run parallel. It's not like we switched back at some point from Uncanny X-Men to just X-Men without setting that precedent for decades. So it just makes no sense.
And, you know, I think it just has to do with, like, you know, as I read more Green Lantern, for instance, where there's like 3 backup stories. That's just normal. There's room for that with the X-Men.
I agree.
There's room to explore that. And I just really feel like the packaging on this is a little silly.
Yeah.
You know, but there's also cool other news in this same vein where like Kieran Gillen is talking about his new amazing project that is evidently like X-Men. And, you know, so happy for him. Really. Because I am feeling a bit dissolved by the further dissolution of Krakoa. As it's continued to unfold, there is something about celebrating the end of Krakoa that is just not the language I would have used.
Yeah, I really agree. It has turned into this odd mishmash of it's tough because we haven't really wound down an era like this. Like, we're sunsetting a product and like a vibe as well. I'm going back to like Avengers, Aaron's Avengers, which was really an era for the Avengers. It sort of marked entirely where they were. They were living in the husk of the dead Celestial. We were starting to do this kind of mythology of the multiversality of Avengers and their kind of their, as I've always said, platonic forms. So it was really a whole era for Avengers, but it's always that comic language of the ramp up to the final issue. And the final issues, because that had multiple books telling the story as well. You know, it had Forever, and then it had the Unlimited comics, so fewer than X-Men, obviously, but like, even still, it was always culminating in the final issue where it ends, and then snap, we cut off and we restart, as is very common with comics. With X-Men, like, we know we have May or June when it all stops and then is going to restart, but it really feels like, rather than a kind of single climactic storytelling stopping point, we've got 17 books that end in a variety of ways that really have to sunset this idea of mutant liberation, which I use that term specifically because now X-Men 97, the first issue, is something mutant liberation. And like, I don't know, Marvel's just sending me a lot of mixed messages with this.
I haven't seen a sunset like this since the Kokomo video. I haven't seen a sunset like this since Netscape Navigator.
Love it.
I haven't seen a sunset like this since Grey Gardens. So I just want to say I really agree with you that there is a holistic experience to be done here, which is why I feel like the word celebrate is rough. Ali Galactic. I only have this guy because of Krakoa. Don't take it from me. Yeah. And, you know, we love the goofy bastards and bitches that we have made along the way. You, of course, included. It's been mind-bending to try and process the end of this era.
Yeah, it's a new thing every day. I don't want to talk too much about the books that are related to it that came out today, because some of us have been busier than others. But this, you know, this most recent issue of X-Men that came out today felt like a really, like a hard heel turn for Duggan, in terms of finally giving us a little bit of the celebratory nature of mutant excellence. But the problem is that it came what felt like too little too late. And I'm somebody who loves a little bit of fan service, especially in the hard times. I always go back to like the season 5 finale of Buffy, where everybody gets to do a little bit of their thing. Xander hits Glory with the wrecking ball. Willow uses some serious magic. Everybody gets involved, and it gives you these really fan servicey moments that I love. That like Xander using the wrecking ball does not make a ton of sense, but at the same time, it's fun. It makes enough sense that you're not like, no, physically, this should not be allowed to happen, and it's just silly and whatever. And similarly, I think we finally got a little bit of that from Duggan today in X-Men, but it's just kind of like, right, but we spent so much time being seriously confused, really unhappy, and like seeing some problems with the writing that are pretty tough to ignore. So it's just a weird time to be looking at this thing that, like, galvanized all of us into making this show and doing this stuff and being a part of it, and seeing it end in a way that is just a lot of mixed messages.
And now how are you supposed to feel with where you are left and with whatever they're going to give you next?
Yeah, I mean, especially with whatever they're going to give you next. I feel like, how are we supposed... I know how Marvel wants us to feel. I know that they want us to be like, celebrating the end of this is as big of a hype party as 2019 when Hoxpox was coming out and we were all freaking out every Wednesday when the next issue would come out and we would learn something new. And I just think trying to be like, aren't these two things the same, makes very little sense.
Yes, and pretty much on every level, the idea that any kind of ending would be celebrated the same way the beginning was, I think, is a very strange thing to expect for fans, but especially the way that it has been handled, and so openly been handled. Even as someone who just produces you guys, so many of the things that I've heard you say about how openly the mismanagement of a lot of these stories have been done, and they just expect you to, you know, go with it. And why would you do that?
And I think another part of it is we have no idea what's coming next. So like how we feel about it isn't even like, well, I'm kind of excited for the next thing. I think they could have gotten away with some amount of, sure, we're sad that Krakoa is ending, but we're celebrating because we see how the stuff that is coming next will sort of tie into it. And it'll all be, the X-Men are always going to X-Men. The mutants are always going to mutant. So even though Krakoa is ending, here's all the stuff that's coming for the next era that you can kind of think of as always being part of the same legacy. We have none of that. They're playing it so close to the vest in terms of what is going to be coming up next. Even like we're getting these announcements about blood hunts that don't really help. They're just as confusing. So, just in this place of always trying to maintain my X excitement, but we've got no idea what's coming next. We've got no idea what's going on. So we're just kind of dealing with it.
Well, I seem to be kind of dealing with a bit of a weird lag situation. So we're just going to kind of hopefully see that thing go away. But all right. Do we want to move on to a book topic?
Yes, we sure do want to move on to a book topic. If we're not starting with X-Men #1, you want to talk about some Cap?
Sure, go for it.
So you said when you were kind of giving like some very brief thoughts on each of the books when we were talking today that Cap is a really good book for someone, like for some kind of fan of Captain America. And when I heard that, I was kind of midway through my second read. I always do like a cursory read and just kind of get some notes down. And I was midway through my second read of like really getting into detail. And I think the first time around, my feeling was like, it's for somebody, but it is not for me. I think I'm not that fan. And the second time around, I sort of started to feel like maybe I'm actually exactly that fan and maybe I'm really, really into this. And this is one of those titles that I was not super keeping up with as like I haven't been keeping up with weekly, but in reading 7 issues of it basically all at once, I now see that like it's kind of a hot little book for me.
What drew you in?
I like a psychedelic Captain America story. I like when the really kind of street level, not very super powered heroes get into something a little outside of their standard zone. And I think especially when you combine that with somebody like J. Michael Straczynski just gets a lot of who and what Captain America is supposed to be and like what the influences of old Cap stories are on a guy like him. J. Michael Straczynski is obviously like an older writer and creator for whom the golden age of comics really was his childhood. And so he's kind of balancing how to tell the stories of the time that he was really a part of with how to be a relevant creator today. And it's not an easy line to walk.
And it's a really tough character to keep fresh in that regard, I'm sure. I know we've talked a lot in the past about the difficulties of keeping a character like Magneto fresh, considering those origins. And the origins are from the same era. They don't hold the same significance, but especially as we are getting closer to the centennial of that era, how do you keep those characters with their longevity?
And I was going to say, I feel like... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm
Nico.
so sorry for all the technological problems. Did we talk about that it's magic yet? Are we talking about the fact
I said a little bit, but I have not gotten there yet. I feel like one of the things I just wanted to say when it was just Keva was that like I feel like this is a run so far that I feel like you as an MCU fan would really appreciate. And it's one of the things that impresses me about Straczynski is it feels like he did not need the note that Cap is now recognizably MCU Cap for a lot of people. He goes back to and Jesus says helps. Like, they depict young Steve Rogers as young Steve Rogers that we saw in the MCU, to the point where like they're really drawing him a lot of times as skinny, weak Chris Evans. And I feel like a lot of this goes back to origin story, like ideas that were really central to the MCU, and this does that job of being like, you remember Cap from the MCU that you really loved? He's here now, and like we can connect him to the one from the comics for you. But anyway, Nico, talk to me a little bit about the magic situation.
What were we talking about? I don't. You got to get me in.
I mean, I was talking about thinking that Straczynski really knows how to walk the line. I mean, as I was just saying about kind of connecting MCU Cap to regular Cap, but also how to tells both stories of Steve when he's a young kid, and like dealing with fighting Nazis, with some really like unique, interesting stuff involving magic, demons, hell, all of that. And when you were talking earlier about how this is for a really certain type of fan, I at first was like, yeah, and I think I'm not that guy. But I realized, especially as we got into the intermezzo arc, the number 7 that just came out today, that I think I'm really vibing with this book.
Yeah. So I feel bad because I don't know how much you guys already talked about, but I want to jump back a bit then to earlier in the, one of the things that the title has done is it's been forced to kind of find a way to get JMS back into the Marvel Universe. JMS is so famous for revolutionizing the nature of a title, for revolutionizing how we look at a character. And one of the things that also often means is some big missteps. And the frustration there for him is that you can't ever know a misstep before the misstep happens. And that's part of the difficulty, I think, with a guy like JMS, who is so often trying to outthink his own storytelling. When you think about JMS's biggest runs, it's making Spider-Man magic. It's making the Squadron Supreme a little bit more than just like Nazis. It's making them super Nazis. One of the things about Captain America is we've seen so many, and I mean this honestly, ugly takes on Captain America over the last 15 years. I think back to when Rick Remender's focus was on proving to us that Captain America was always a bully. Like he's Liz Lemon asking other kids during the Depression about their mom's divorce. It is so strange to me that so many people have sought for so long is supposed to be in the MCU to somebody like a Kevo. I am more fascinated by this title's, more than the magic, I am much more fascinated by this title's obsession with reasserting Captain America as the proto Boy Scout, but like a sexy, cool, fuck you Boy Scout. Like a hot, sexy Boy Scout. But
it's
like
a very weird thing because like they do really focus on exactly that, but also how he is the weird, scrawny kid that is sort of by dint of the fact that he will become so hot when he finally gets super soldiered. Like, is he sexy when he is basically dying? This book does try to have it all a little bit, and I appreciate where they're coming from with like his heart is so good, he is such a hero at his core, that there is something a little bit sexy about him. It's kind of how you can understand how Captain Carter loved her Steve.
And I think that's even part of what's a little tough for me about this title, where they're trying to work in Sharon. Okay, first of all, big Sharon fan. Hi, number 1, big Sharon fan. Also, number 2, really big fan of the actress that plays Sharon.
Oh God, here we go.
When she was a little girl, Emily Van Camp, man. I love her so much. But currently, in the best book, I didn't know was the best book until TK told me it was the best book. Thunderbolts, you get a really great opportunity to engage with Sharon as she is now. And as she is now is scary. And she's like a big murder girl with like a ghosty face, and she'll kill you. And so like part of where I'm a little bit fascinated by this title is it's sort of like, but underneath the death mask, she's still just an old time gal. And I'm like, first of all, no, she was born in the 70s. Now, second of all, no, she's not. And this book just doesn't care about other people's character development. It's just about Captain America.
You make a good point about Sharon, and I kind of didn't really consider that. This clearly is one of those that's trying to be archetypal by being like, Sharon is kind of his OTP. I'm always, when I finally was like, fine, I'll get into the Avengers, was right as Disassembled was happening, and they were kind of trying to make Cap and Wanda happen. So I'm always sort of on shaky ground with Cap's love life.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm not super invested in whether or not it's Sharon. But I do sort of get the vibe from this book that J. Michael Straczynski, who's telling you these stories of like what makes Cap fundamentally Cap, making Sharon his love interest, sort of, even if he were to say like, I'm not saying that that's his OTP, I'm just saying like she's the one that I picked, by nature of the fact that so much of this book is Cap buys and moves into and refurbishes his childhood home so he can relive his childhood, so we can all understand how Steve Rogers, this very sick person who at the age of like 18 only had 5 years left to live and could barely do anything and was constantly getting the shit beat out of him, him coming to understand how he is Captain America at his core. By putting that person against any romantic interest, you're kind of going to say, well, that's who at his core he loves, because we're exploring who he is at his core. And I don't necessarily mind the idea that it's Sharon, but she's also in seemingly a throuple with oh no, I guess it's not her, it's Yelena. Never mind, too many blondes.
If I can though,
Yeah.
you know who I think he is in a great relation? Cap. You know who I think Cap is in a great relationship with? Asmodeus. I really love a book series by brilliant author and Marvel Comics genius Mike Carey called the Felix Kastner novels. They're basically like, what if he didn't have to stop writing Hellblazer because Hellblazer was a corporate concern? And in it, there's an evil demon named Asmodeus, and that's all I can think of as I read this. That's kind of maybe the difficulty you tread when you're talking about a character who, a name that has so many meanings across so many forms of fiction. So Captain America is fighting a demon who eats major change points. I love this. Okay, so like they're like Gandhi. Obviously, the universe where Hillary won the 2016 election.
I will say I appreciated the reference because it shouldn't just be white people. Harriet Tubman did feel a little bit out of left field.
It did feel a little bit like, have you heard of black people? We found one.
Right. Yes, that is. Thank you. That is it. I felt like if you wanted to cover the spectrum of human history, it was just an interesting choice, J. Michael Straczynski. Interesting choice.
Well, and when I think about, in terms of the interesting choices this book made, okay, what is with Slappy the Goosebumps dummy Doctor Strange?
I think that was so funny. I thought it was so funny.
It's
I
funny,
will say,
and the idea is brilliant.
Yeah, I will say that's one of the places where he seemingly tried a little harder to be in somebody else's continuity. Like, he was very clear, Steven can't come to the table right now. He is off with his wife doing the things that are happening in Doctor Strange.
He's off with his wife, Charlize Theron, where they are in the Fast and Furious franchise, and they're also what else? Monster by BT. The thing about this title is when you think about a Straczynski, when you think about a guy like this, you're not thinking about a title that wants to play nice. This is full on the chicks post controversy, pre-landslide. This is that moment for me because they're not here to play nice. This title is here to reset some shit. And it's always tough because the book that resets shit, the more I realize that the Marvel Universe isn't my playhouse, and it never was, the more I realize that, like, it's made of runs for me. I don't think I love the X-Men the way I love Chris Claremont's X-Men. I don't think I love the X-Men the way I love Mike Carey's X-Men. But one of the things that leads me to realize then is that we have things that build our Marvel Universe. I think about Mark Waid's Daredevil and how everything thought that was so cool and everybody used that fucking Daredevil. Everybody changed their idea of Daredevil. And then I think about books that were so fucking cool. Like, let's go with something like, how about Mike Carey's X-Men Legacy? That book was so fucking cool. Everybody did not start using this hyper-evolved version of Rogue and suddenly push that character forward. But after that, the things that happened to her in Legacy were just canon. And everybody had to respond to them. It's a little bit the Killing Joke syndrome. It's a little bit like, so The Killing Joke was a story published at DC that was supposedly the definitive story of the Joker, but not really. It was out of canon. And then writers just started acknowledging it, and it just became canon. Same thing with Elektra Lives Again. This is that book. This book will hit 25 issues, and it will get us to Cap 675 or whatever. And that will be that. But this book is going to be the tentpole that Marvel measures future Captain America runs from, because it was not going to be the, while creatively fun, fucking mess that was the just ended era that I couldn't even figure out how to get into, let alone catch up on.
And at the end of the day, when this one started, or this one is going, and Cap and Sam are just buds that are hanging out, it sort of feels like in a lot of ways I don't need to know what happened here, what happened there in that previous run. But I keep thinking about how J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man is the reason that we have the Spider-Verse and everything that has come after, and this establishment that there's something greater about Peter Parker and Spider-Man than can sort of be contained in even just saying it and even just establishing it. Once you say that that's there, you then are saying to every other creator, and please, I left you a huge box of tools and toys.
Totally.
Play with them forever. And I think the idea of Cap as a Nexus actor, or whatever the term is,
Agent of Change.
Nexus
Thank
agent.
you.
Thank you. With Cap as a Nexus agent, really could be that thing, because I think Cap as the most important Avenger gets a little exhausting when you're like, is he the Xander? Sure. Is he the guy that, like, I'm like that guy because I don't have any powers, but I want to be a hero? Xander was terrible, but you know what Joss Whedon was trying to do. It's sort of like,
Joss Whedon's trying to see feet.
We all know.
We're all trying to see feet. No, and when you have characters like Wanda and Vision, and I mean, kind of everybody who's on the current team of Avengers, it just makes forcing the idea that Cap is the most important Avenger get a little more exhausting every time you're like, right, but he's the best of us because we just said so. And so giving him some things where it's like, he's the best of us because we said so, and that means that the universe hinges on him in some specific ways, I think is kind of an important thing that could go on to be a lot of story potential for the character in the future.
Well, I want to splice into that and say how important that is to what I think is the future of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that I think Avengers Twilight is the future of the Marvel Universe because I like it the most, because I don't. I think it's a really strong B plus, A minus, but I don't think it's an A plus plus plus. But I do think that they are setting up a future of the Avengers that is going to ultimately impact the current course of the Marvel Universe. I think this iteration of Cap as a timeless idea ties directly into that. And, I don't mean to change our topic soon, because I think what I want to do is continue to talk about Captain America, because everything you're saying about Cap really connects with my understanding of this run of the Sentry. One of the things about this run of the Sentry is this version of the Sentry, there are three. The annoying, problematic white one seems to think that he should be the most important Avenger. He thinks he should be Avengers Prime. One of the reasons that Captain America is not Avenger Prime in the pages of Jason Aaron's Avengers Assemble is because Captain America would never cast himself as the most important person in the Avengers. And that is what makes him special. By contrast, the idea that somebody wants the Sentry powers, chooses to use them, and then focuses on how they make them better, that is the opposite of being the most important person in the Avengers, down to the spoiler alert. The character who ultimately does keep the powers decides not to go by the Sentry, which in and of itself makes me want to chew on my arm. But, we will get to that. I think there is so much to be mined from the parallel of Captain America versus the Sentry that this run of the Sentry is unfortunate, that unless, in my mind, a Mark Millar comes along and that weird run of the New Warriors is it into Civil War, I'm afraid that the big wigs at Marvel aren't going to push this very brave take on the Sentry, and the way it sort of deforming the idea of the Golden Age trope. The original Sentry was, what if a guy broke into a lab, stole some drugs, and used them? While that was not the original presentation, that is ultimately what Bendis, good friend of the original creator Paul Jenkins, decided the character's origin would ultimately be. That is actually vaguely Captain America's origin, a little bit 2%. So, how do you feel about this reinterpretation of the Sentry in contrast with the timelessness of this Captain America run?
I mean, I always sort of appreciated the hefty Marvel attempt to give us a Superman in the way that they did with the Sentry. I remember when the Sentry was coming out, and at the time I did think it was kind of cool. I really liked the idea of he's always been there, you just forgot, and we'll play around with giving you a bunch of stories in the style of where he ought to have been, and creating a character whose look and design felt very much like it could have come from that bygone era, who had that sort of unlimited power of Superman. I maybe at the time I remember, and have since, because we've gotten a lot of Squadron Supreme stories, thought, well, why not just fucking Squadron Supreme? They already exist. But I appreciated the project. And since then, it has been trying to see people attempt to use the Sentry and sort of not know what to do. Sort of often making him way too, he becomes a deus ex machina a lot of the time, but then writers sort of flagellate themselves for using that, so then they have to do,
I'm sorry, he's so powerful and I used him.
So now we got to do a stupid Void story and somebody gets fridged. And
wait, where was the Void in all of this? Was the Void was just Ryan Tedder, right?
I mean, I don't know. So the one thing I will say is I loved this story. I thought it was a ton of fun. I thought it was a really interesting superhero origin story that has ties to the previous incarnation of that hero. I really like Jason Loo. I like everything Jason Loo writes, and I think he represents the kind of writer that I'm usually looking for at Marvel a little more strongly. I'm sort of even. I love a Gillen. I love a Ewing. they're really big names. My expectations are really high, which is not always fair to them, but then they don't always meet them. And then a lot of times, I think they're given stuff they shouldn't be given. And even getting into like a
wedding, cough, wedding, cough,
wedding,
cough,
cough,
can't
wedding.
wedding, cough.
And even getting into a Fox or an Orlando, who I think are great writers. Again, they're getting books I don't necessarily think they should be getting. But
Orlando Fox is absolutely my new favorite 1940s pulp detective.
I love Aaliyah Williams. I love Atini Howard. I love, in some ways, even a Chip Zdarsky. It feels like he doesn't get the volume of work that some of these other guys get. And feels like the way that he writes is sort of closer to an independent or a self-published book. Something that isn't like so Marvel House style, it can't possibly offend or often, innovate. So for all that, I really did love this run of the Sentry. I think 4 issues was maybe not enough. But at the same time, I feel like immediately I thought this was maybe going to even be a 5 issue, which I thought maybe wouldn't be enough. But like even 1 extra issue might have given us some time to get into this a little bit. I was not surprised to discover that it was 4. I guess it was more thinking exactly what you're talking about. Okay, so now what? This creator that I think is fantastic, that I think has really cool ideas, that I think is a fantastic voice, has created this new paradigm for the Sentry. Are we doing this? Or is this going to be my beloved Alyssa Wong fixing the decades-old problem of Iron Fist, and then we get 1 sort of truncated series, and we haven't seen Iron Fist since?
And that's even kind of the problem here. When I think about the deconstruction of the Marvel Universe, part of what comes to mind is the idea that they're trying to build a world where, if they needed to, the Sentry could become a Thor-level character with his own Thor-level mythos by virtue of building something more into him. When I think about the Sentry, right, we have to do a little bit of history homework here. The Sentry first appeared in a Wizard magazine. It was a viral marketing campaign before viral marketing campaigns had, memery about them. And in the pages of Wizard magazine, they had fake letters that said, "Oh, I found some old issues of the Sentry. My dad used to talk about this guy. How come nobody at Marvel ever mentions him? But I found my dad's old copies." And they had it unravel as this mystery that the Sentry, in order to defeat his equal opposite, the Void, had to purge himself from reality. And they used that to launch the Sentry one-shot series by Paul Jenkins. And they showed some amazing moments from early Marvel, including the Sentry. It was like Sentry versus the Hulk, Sentry and the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, etc. At the end of Sentry's matching 6-issue mini, he has to banish himself from reality for whatever reason, to banish the Void. And in the process, he strips himself from Marvel reality, and no one can remember him. In the pages of New Avengers by Bendis a couple of years later, the Sentry is found in the raft as a prisoner, Bob Reynolds, his real alter ego. It is revealed that Paul Jenkins is a real person in the Marvel Universe and is somehow responsible for writing the Sentry in a metafictional way, which creates the Sentry well enough. In the pages of New Avengers, we find out the Sentry is actually Bob Reynolds, low-life thug who stole some experimental drugs, injected himself full of them, became the Sentry, and it also created the Void, who is also 100% Bob Reynolds. The Sentry dies at the end of the heroic age, or just to kick off the heroic age at the end of Siege, and it leads us to the Sentry being this mythic figure who never was. Okay, so you're all caught up. The Sentry he's Jeff Buckley. He is the greatest superhero who never was, because he died before he ever got a chance to be, and he was always plagued by his demons. So I don't know. I think there are ways in which Jason Loo was tasked with creating a competent, likable, sellable backstory for a character who is touted on every Screen Rant list as Marvel's Superman, when what he really is Marvel's professional junkie, sitting next to Courtney Love as the real world's professional widow.
I very appreciate that take. I don't think you're wrong. And part of my problem is we all know that no matter what happens, at some point, somebody's going to go, right, but I love classic Sentry. It's been 2 decades.
He was so cool. And the Void, oh man, that's his darkness.
Yeah, exactly. And so
like the unknown from Willy Wonka.
It is his unknown from the Willy Wonka experience and the first appearance of the Void and the Willy Wonka experience.
I'm obsessed with this. I would let you keep going if we didn't have a show to do.
Right.
So we know we're getting Robert Reynolds back at some point. I really did love, although it maybe made it a little difficult to understand everything that was happening. I loved that we didn't see really much or almost any Robert Reynolds, that what we did see was kind of, it was flashes, but a lot of this is left to other characters to kind of explain, and we don't fully get an understanding or explanation of why this is happening or what is happening.
The Sentry powers just suddenly become legacy. Ooh, I love that. But then there's a Marvel phenomenon where if you are so powerful, you just become a legacy character.
Yeah, it's a little awkward, but it leaves us with a character living with a disability, who is also a character of color, who gets the Sentry powers and gets to be the Sentry, and takes the name Solaris, which I do love. It's a weird thing. This book is called The Sentry. It's a lot of it is about Misty Knight and Jessica Jones,
but it introduces the Nissan Solaris.
There you go. It's always going to be like that. I'm not that worried. It is a lot of Jessica Jones is essentially the protagonist of this book.
First Lady of New York City, Jessica Jones.
And then I love that he brings in the Aberrant Crimes Division, which was introduced in the Sentry, I think, Volume 2. And that's not an organization that is brought up that much, but weirdly also just appeared in the pages of Captain America.
Captain America.
I love this division. I think I love an organization. I really think give me a Damage Control book more often, please. We just had one. It was very funny, but it was too funny. Give me
it was written by that other Adam Goldberg.
Yes. Wait, was it written by? Wait, who's the?
It's not written by the Hebrew Hammer. It's written by the creator of the sitcom. They're not the same Adam. They're not the same Adam Goldberg.
Real? Okay, I'm dumb.
They are two different.
No,
because the Hebrew Hammer is Dazed and Confused, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So yes, I did think they were all the same person. Okay, so that's embarrassing. Moving on.
It's a them thing. It's not you. It's not you.
Bring back Damage Control, which was too funny, but that's okay. We'll tighten it up. Give me an ACD book. I want a Wand book. That was the other thing. I very much appreciated that they brought in the very recent Doctor Strange lore of Wand went rogue and reanimated the Sentry with the power of 1,000,000 ghosts, which is somehow kind of connected to this, and the ghosts are involved. It is a bit difficult to understand.
Ghosts will follow you home.
Is that a Haunted Mansion?
Yeah,
I love it. That should be this new Solaris's Fortress of Solitude should be the Haunted Mansion. But I like that this suffers from comic book logic in that way where, if you cite something and go, obviously because he was once powered with the souls of 1,000,000 ghosts, these ghosts are here because ghosts. And you don't really have to do a full-on, here's the mechanism by which this is all happening. I don't know. Sometimes I get a little bit of a kick out of that.
So the other thing that this title gives us is a lot of dead people Okay.
Yes.
And that's what's a little bit tough. While I really appreciate the idea that Jason Lowe was hoping to tell, by giving us so many sentries who die sort of like off panel or in their first tale, it makes them feel less. And I know that's kind of the danger here, but by creating so many dead sentries, I think the next writer might be able to give our main new character Solaris these ghosts as her guides, sort of like, Avatar spirit states. But at the same time, none of them are better rehearsed with the sentry powers. They're just like a marketing executive, a guy on a skateboard, a mutant, but his power is hairiness. And like, it's just not. It is a really cool idea. And I think where I'm sad is I kind of maybe wish that Jason Lowe had saved it for himself and had used it in some amazing, albeit inevitably low selling, but Eisner Award winning, leading to his incredible run on X-Men, independent title, because Marvel is never going to give these additional characters the credit time they deserve. It's just not going to happen. In a world where Uncanny X-Men is the 700 issue of X-Men number 35 and Ultimate X-Men is only about Hisako, we are not going to see a world where these characters thrive. Just look at the pages of Shang-Chi.
I guess what I would say is you're absolutely right, and yet all we can do at this point is hold out hope. Like, all you can do is root for the creators like Jason Lowe when they get a story, and then hope that a mix of providence and changes in the industry mean that some of the ideas that they put forth that you kind of go like, this is a really cool idea, but you did it for Marvel, and so it was a waste. Something will change, because I love the idea. I liked all these characters, and I was bummed that they died because of exactly that, because it feels like since they died and since Marvel is the way that it is, that's probably it. At the same time, he wrote into the story a lot of interesting ways that they might not be dead, that they, that it might be that because she essentially finds them and incarnates them. And it could be that if she were ever to come back, which in and of itself is a huge question, that she could use that same power, that she could always, when needed, incarnate the other people that were the Sentry, so that she was never the lone person that had that power, and they could, show up and be a team. I think there's like a billion cool ways that all those characters could not be dead and never seen again. But I feel more likely and more presently, they just probably won't be. And that's not Jason Lowe's fault. And I don't know that it is a creator's problem to not tell the version of the story that they want to, because of the fact that when they hand it over to the mothership, it's out of their hands, and all of their cool ideas, who the fuck knows what will happen to them. But this is all the way back to kind of the issue with comics overall that I think is really killing us these days, is just when you're working so hard to publish 4 issues that sell well, and you're not giving anybody more than 4, and you maybe are even canceling the ones that get 5 because the first one didn't sell enough, and just you're not really working in abundance. If a lot of this stuff was getting published digitally or in anthologies, I think it really could have room to tell the story based on expectations,
like, but slowly grow.
Yeah, but inevitably what's just happening is we'll give you the 4 issues, and unless it is the best-selling book that we have had all year, it is a failure, and we'll wait for the next person to pitch this property that we think maybe we can sell, that, they wrote for Grey's Anatomy, or, that they're writing on Abbott Elementary, and that big name will get us some views, and hopefully it sells enough by issue 4 that we consider doing another volume.
Well, and the other direction, where people like Jason Lowe, who write amazing runs like The Sentry, are going to get, yanked up by Suits LA, and then they're done. They're out of comics, and when they return, it's in 20 years as a J. Michael Straczynski.
Yeah.
So this Cap run, I give the run a B+. I give any random issue between an A- and a B-, but the series for me is a B+. I really like the direction. I love Magic Cap. It's so silly. But one of the reasons that makes it work and makes it kind of fun is because there is no way Cap isn't magic. Do you love 1602 Cap? Sure, we all do. At 1602 College, you can major in time travel, superhero repair, etc. One of the things that the idea of this Sentry series gives us is that same freeness, that same fullness of iteration. But because of my fears about its potential usage in the future of the Marvel Universe, I'm going to give it a B-. But if I were grading it as like when Bendis did Takio and like it was its own thing, if I'm grading it that way, B+. Love this. Want to see way, way more of it. Would buy every volume of it. But as a result of it being at Marvel, I'm afraid I might just check it out on Unlimited.
I think that's really fair. Cap for me is a definite B+. I just had a lot of fun with it. All of my issues are essentially just kind of not knowing where Marvel is at. And then this, I think, is also really a B+. Maybe even an A-. I think it's really an iconic use of a character. And again, both things I had a lot of fun with. And I think I haven't been having a ton of fun even when I'm very interested in stories. But also, all of my problems and all of my caveats come from Marvel. These people are giving you stuff. Do more with it than just kind of publish it and then wait to see if the response is big enough to fund it.
Yes, she is giving, mama.
Or like kickstart them from now on or something. I don't know, but I need some way of like understanding ahead of time what's going to happen.
She is kicking, mama.
Kicking and starting and balling and changing.
Kicking and screaming.
All right, well, until we have our next ballroom competition hosted by Sandy Duncan, I think one of the big things we need to take a look at is the ever-transforming landscape of what Marvel is trying to do with characters that share iterations. As much as we're saying that Captain America is a character who is Steve Rogers, well, there's multiple Captain Americas running around. I love that Sam Wilson is kind of permanently Captain America. Captain America Falcon, sure, but he's Captain America, the same way that we saw characters like Jon Stewart step into the role of Green Lantern and never really shy away, while characters like Alan Scott couldn't really lock down that moniker. With the pages of Daredevil, I was very afraid that we were going to see Elektra, and I hate to say it, but demoted back to and. Here, I am really fascinated because this issue 4 of Daredevil Gang War by Erica Schultz and Sergio Davila, I thought this was painfully unnecessary, actually. I maybe wish there were 4 more pages in issue 3 that did this job, and instead, Marvel gave Erica Schultz a huge Daredevil Elektra one-shot annual that allowed her to explore these themes. Because the problem is not Erica Schultz, nor is the problem Sergio Davila's brilliant pencil work. Sergio Davila and Erica Schultz painted a beautiful story. What did not paint a beautiful story was Gang War. Gang War was like stepping on thumbtacks and Legos and having somebody throw your waffles out the window. It had a lot of things I like. It had a lot of things I need. It also had things that I just generally want to put in my mouth. But at the end of the day, they were provided to me in all the wrong ways. I felt kind of like I was forced to step on things I like, and all of the things I wanted were thrown away. And Gang War sucked. Honestly, the books were good. Gang War sucked. And I can't figure out why this isn't just an ongoing book, also called Daredevil, or is just a regular backup feature, and it was called Daredevils. This was great. And this 4th issue, throwing Miles in for no reason.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, and a lot of the way
New Jersey! I
do a lot of the way agree. I will say one of the first things I read this first today. This is the first book I read when I picked up my comics. and I was just coming off of I wasn't just coming off of last week's reading. I read last week's books last week, but I had been thinking a lot about Resurrection of Magneto, a book that I think is really brilliant, and I think Al Ewing owns Max Eisenhart in a way from the Krakoan era that it will be difficult to extract my feelings about Ewing from Magneto going forward. But all that said, all that really good stuff said, one of the things when I was clipping panels and pages from Trial of Magneto, the big illustration I had was, this is just full of words. It is just pages of thought balloons and narration balloons and dialogue.
Someone's getting paid by the letter.
Truly. And this book, right off the bat, impressed me by how much she was able to say about who Elektra was with very few words, with big splash pages and big pages of action that gave me so much of Elektra Nachos, but not that much dialogue and not that much monologuing in narration balloons. And yet I feel closer to her now as Daredevil than I ever have before. Yes. And you're right insofar as that feels bigger than Daredevil Gang War. Don't read this if you're not reading Gang War. It's part of Gang War, so if you don't read Gang War, you're never going to get it. This could just as easily have been Madame Mask doesn't appear enough for it to be like, this is so confusing. How did we get here? It literally takes dialogue that's already in there to say, this is what Elektra is doing at the time that the Spider-Man event Gang War is happening. And because she is in New York City, she is dealing with some of the fallout from that.
Ali Galactic, if you read Tom Taylor's X-23, all new Wolverine, right? I mean, she is Wolverine, but in my brain, they have not respected her long enough for that title to have been called All New Wolverine. Bologna is in this. Bologna! Yes. Bologna! I fight all the time. I have 4 claws. No.
Stab. And Ali, I agree that Resurrection of Magneto has been really, really good. I just think it is so word heavy. And I don't know that is serving the purpose that the whole creative team and editorial team behind it thinks it is. So that's where, when I compare it to something like this, I'm just really impressed with the writing on this Daredevil book. But yeah, Nico, I mean, you're right. It deserves better than just being Daredevil Gang War. Please don't, if you don't like this, don't worry. It's not a part of anything. It doesn't matter. Don't look at us like that. Don't perceive this book.
I wish this was I somehow wish this ran between issues of Saladin Ahmed's Daredevil. It is that necessary to understanding who Daredevil is in the Marvel Universe, because currently Daredevil is not one person. Daredevil is a priest and also Elektra.
And you and I have been talking about Daredevils for a while, and I feel like it's a bigger, I don't know, I feel like this idea, you can keep doing little miniseries that the first issue sells really well and then the rest of them don't because nobody cares. But one thing you haven't done yet is a double feature, is something that says, we packed more value into this for you. And I think these two characters are a great example. Daredevil and Daredevil are a great example of who you could do that with. One thing that came out this week that I'm really excited to read is Spectacular Spider-Man. It just, all it takes is one little letter change.
By the guy who does the gargoyles?
The gargoyles! All it takes is that one little letter change. Men, okay, we're cooking with gas now. There's more stuff happening here. And the same thing, Daredevil.
You give me such a hard time about my gas range.
Yeah, well, it's dangerous for the home. Daredevils, we got 2 of them. Let's get into it a little bit. Also, there was just some phenomenal art in this issue of Elektra's hair being more prehensile and preternatural than Medusa the Inhumans.
I believe the phrase we should use is vainglorious.
Vainglorious, Greek-tastic, alive with the power of the gods. I mean, it's just, she's great. I love her so much.
It was art excellence, and that's why I wanted to be so sure to give Sergio Davila his due. When you think about reiterations of a character, it always kind of is like, oh, that's the Alex Ross look for Bucky, or that's the whoever designed that version of the character. But Sergio Davila came in and said, okay, I understand that I am stepping into a Chichetto design, but I think, hey, Tasty Cake, thank you so much for hanging with us tonight, and you will be sorely missed. I really think that, the nature of this costume being so beautifully reiterated is such a powerful thing. We all too often see titles where that super cool costume, it just kind of clunks. I think about the amazing Wolverine costume that he had during the later era of the Death of Wolverine, which he had during the Ryan Stegman run that he showed up in the pages of Ms. Marvel in. He looked so fucking cool and so sexy, and that Ms. Marvel issue did such a good job with that costume. It made me very aware of how bad a job everyone else did with it. So, like, seeing Davila just bring this costume to beautiful life. You comment on the hair pretensileness, but like, look at the runners. What do you call them? The sash points, the poussoir protectors, and the way they just sort of billow in the breeze. They are majestic.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this was really an iconic moment for Elektra. I just think a lot of people aren't going to hear about it, and you can't buy back the hype. This is why Marvel is so obsessed with number ones and why books are minis, because that first month's anticipation, oh, I hear cool things, oh, Elektra's finally getting a solo title as Daredevil, that's once in a lifetime. And if you say it's Gang War, where the most important thing is actually Amazing Spider-Man, you need to be reading Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man, you want to read Spider-Man. Remember, everybody loves Spider-Man. And so everybody gets kind of fucked by, a Deadly Hands of Kung Fu I thought was fantastic. Again, similar thing. Everything is Spider-Man. And guys, we picked these up when Nico and Kevo and Jonah were up here in Portland. My favorite shop for all things geek, not just comic shop, because that would be Coast City. But Newberry Comics has a huge manga section, and they had 2 copies of Spider-Man Fake Red. We had so much fun doing... There he is! Oh, hi, friend!
I had a bookmark.
We had so much fun doing Deadpool Samurai that we're going to do Spider-Man Red. We're going to have a blast. Also, I don't know if you heard, but when I was checking out with the books...
What the fuck was wrong with that guy?
Like,
the Deadpool one sucked. I wanted to go over there and slap him.
We're just going to leave the store, but yeah, so when I was checking out with the books and I was trying to say
more and more
how much I loved Deadpool Samurai, I was like, yeah, Marvel's been doing a lot of manga lately, and they were like, oh yeah, that Deadpool one, that sucked. It was a very awkward moment. Anyway, this was so good.
You're trash, not dubstep.
I don't know what to do with it. But oh yeah, so Deadly Kung Fu, a really good Shang-Chi story in a world where we're not getting enough of those. Luke Cage deserves a solo title. I think a 4-issue Luke Cage as mayor title would have been fantastic. And again, he's mayor of New York City. The gang war is happening in New York City. If this just comes out at the same time, you don't need to call it gang war, which automatically cuts off anybody who, if we didn't cover this show, like if we didn't cover comics for this show, I'm not picking up 50 issues of Blood Hunt. I'm not picking up 50 issues of Gang War. I don't care about these things necessarily. I barely
want to gesture menacingly at 50 issues of Blood Hunt, let alone pick them up.
Yeah, like, it's annoying. I don't care about vampires a lot. I mean, I do when Jason Aaron writes them, and I know he's not writing this, so I'm not as excited. But I pick up everything because we cover it, and I want to be in the know. But it's disappointing because I can't tell every person in my life, you got to pick this stuff up, and you often can't convince people. So it's just a bummer. A lot of these tie-in books really could have done something. It's weird to me that Spider-Woman is the one that didn't get. It's just Spider-Woman, but Gang War is on the cover. I don't know why Elektra couldn't have that. I don't know why Luke Cage couldn't have that.
Did you do AmVamp? American Vampire over at DC? It's spectacular. It's,
Is it part of their canon?
No. It's, it's creator owned, and it's by Scott Snyder, and it's Raphael Albuquerque, and it's, Kebo can tell you it is like my favorite horror comic of all time. AmVamp is a big deal.
Going on the list right now.
But let me tell you, the end falls apart kind of hard.
That'll happen.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the nature of vampires. And you know why? Because if you do enough vampire stories, you're just fucked. And I think Marvel ran out of its vampire stories. And I think that's sort of the same thing with, that we're talking about with Blood Hunt, that we're kind of talking about with Gang War.
They ran out of their gang stories.
Exactly.
They were out of their gang stories in 1998 when they were starting to come up in Spider-Girl, and that was the thing that we kept saying. It's like, I don't know that this section of the Marvel universe has the juice. It's 30 years later, and we're still doing it with the same people even. Maybe sometimes it's their kids, which okay, that's cute. It's always daughters. No thank. I'm okay with 6 fucking daughters.
Oh, so sleepy.
It does kind of feel like that. I don't know, man. It's so weird. Everything that we're talking about today is like, love the thing, hate the box that it came in.
Yikes. Yeah, you know what? I ordered something from Amazon and it came in a brown paper bag today. And so it was delivered.
This is exactly that.
Yeah, it was delivered by a store. The product is still great and I love the product, but the way it was given to me left me with pause for my money. And so I'm really hoping that Daredevil Gang War leads Marvel to recognize the value of having people like Erica Schultz and Sergio Davila on this character, and the validity of having 2 Daredevil titles running concurrently, one featuring Matt, one featuring with Elektra, and the ways you can incorporate them together in a big picture way.
I will say, if you are watching this, listening to this, seeing this in any way, and you are kind of wondering what the deal is with Elektra right now and Elektra as Daredevil, you don't need to have read any Gang War. You don't need to care about Gang War. Read this. This is who Elektra is. Erica Schultz just bought, purchased, and owns Elektra. She truly gets who Elektra as Daredevil is. And I think really for new readers and readers who are kind of unfamiliar with this most recent post-Zdarsky turn, this is something to read to really understand where this character is at today. And what
I'm going to be sour apples for a second.
I love when you're sour apples.
They are the best Jolly Rancher, but here's the thing.
What?
I think there's only one way that, I hope you knew it when you got to the word. Okay. Electric Nachos would never say the word adorable, except under one circumstance. She would say, oh, he's adorable. But then it would need to be in italics. So here's the thing. I
already have my argument back. Go.
I actually think this line is great. I wish it was in italics. I know that sounds really stupid, but if you could sell the affectation, the delicious way that my Elektra, the most perfect woman to ever step into the Marvel universe, would viscerally say it in a way that still feels like honey sliding down your throat. Oh my God. I just really, and italics alone, guys.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it. There's a moment in X-Men this week where somebody goes, oh no, it's one of the X-Men telepaths. And Emma goes, I'm the telepath. and it's just not properly lettered, because what she, I believe, is saying is, I'm the telepath.
The telepath.
Right. And it's just not quite there.
Getting Todd Klein. Somebody call Toddy.
Emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Precisely. And I actually even think it is meant to be italicized. It's just the lettering is a little too minimalist. And so it misses. But I hear what yes, the exact same thing here, where it's almost like even kind of a bad, she's like, oh, but I can't kill him. He's adorable. Like, I am Elektra and I kill the things that annoy me. But this one, like, it's not even that I like that it's adorable. It's that is its quality. And I know I'm not supposed to kill that.
All right. So I want to ask you a question. Would you be in on this with me? Here's what I really want Marvel to do. Yeah. I want Marvel to buy in on an idea of a team of daredevils.
Yes.
And I think it should be Matt, Elektra, Bellona, Mary, and I'm gonna kind of throw in a self-created thing here.
Oh, okay.
I think that, like, they need to bring in another male figure, but it needs to be based on a villain. Part of the problem is I want it to somehow be the child of Lester and Melvin, and they can't have a child because no egg. But, you know, we could find a way around that. It's the Marvel Universe. But I think at this point, we need to see daredevils. We can no longer live in a world with monovoce daredevil. I think we only can live in a choral daredevil situation. It's all very rondo, you know?
Choral.
I thought the fifth one was going to be Ikari.
Well, you need to read Mark Waid's run, and then we'll talk about why.
I mean, I've read some of it now, but
it's so good. It's so good. It's literally, it's one of those things where, like, when it was coming out, it deformed the way other books could reset your expectations, because the surreality of the blending of the art and the writing allowed us to surrender to a redetermination of these pieces. It was almost like somebody took the same image and recut the pieces. And that's sort of what's missing from this Daredevil gang war, that stops me from giving it an A+, the way I give even the worst issue of Mark Waid's run, which, by the way, it's the Monsters issue. But this gets an A or an A- from me. It gets an A for me without issue 4. Issue 4 is an unfortunate epilogue, but it almost feels like an epitaph as a result. This is an A 3-issue series for me, but because I don't think Marvel as a company has the financial ground to have the conviction to support this 4th issue as a starting point for Erica Schultz's ongoing Daredevil narrative, I have to give this an A or A-, but really the best of intentions all the way down.
This is definitely an A for me. I will say a moment that I had was getting to the end, seeing the preview for Daredevil, feeling extremely insulted because did you love that cover?
It's Logan, an initial of Daredevil. Everything makes sense again.
I mean, I like the concept, but Elektra has not been appearing enough in that book, period. Then on top of the fact that you're like, this is over, but, you know, read Daredevil because Elektra's there. No, she's not. So I found that a little insulting. But then I was like, you know, I'm going to pop back over to Matt Murdock's Daredevil and just sort of reread a little bit to remind myself that there are 2 Daredevils and, you know, this is an important thing. I don't know, man. I am not as galvanized by that run as I am by these 4 issues.
I'll say this. I love the art. I love the I love the energy of the writing, right? Because, like, this is, I want you guys to go full on Christina Aguilera back to basics. I want you to go back to when you
think this is back to basics?
No. I'm asking you to go back to basics.
Okay.
When the originators, the innovators were alive. They're not dead, any of them. But I do not like Weezy Simonson's New Mutants, like, even much. I like it fine, but I don't like it much. What I really like is the strong vibe, the energy, the excitement she approaches the characters with. Even when I think most of the stories are kind of like, slogs. That's kind of how I feel about this run of Daredevil. I really like the energy everybody's approaching it with, even when I kind of feel like it's a slog to get through each issue.
Yeah.
Not this one, that one.
Yeah, the Matt Murdock Daredevil. I don't want to name names because I'm not trying to go hard on the writing team. And again, it's not their fault. This is the same problem that I'm having. This is the same problem that I'm having with Avengers right now. It is so difficult to come off somebody's iconic run. And I just think if we're talking about processes with Marvel and like things they need to be sort of making house rules and house standards, you need like a year off of writing a standard comic book for a big property once it has just had an iconic title thing. Looking at X-Men, a year of like just a couple X-Men books slowly rebuilding the mansion, in some way trying to tell us like we're doing it differently for a second while we get our bearings again.
What about a couple of like, and obviously Marvel call me, but I think something they could have done that would have been really brave would have been Sunspot and Cannonball, and getting a 6-issue series that sort of represented the X-Force title. Do a couple of runs, do 12 books. Understand that like because I'm doing a lot of research into DC, I'm coming across stuff that I've never really seen done at Marvel. Marvel's always done soft resets on characters, whereas DC, because of Crisis, kind of did hard resets. When they needed a minute to figure out what to do with Green Lantern, they just made it a core title. It was Green Lantern Core 201 to 226. And then they did something called Emerald Dawn, which literally reset canon. It said, by the way, Sinestro was always Hal Jordan's first teacher, which is amazing, but it's a redetermination of canon in a way that transforms the fact that Sinestro originally met Hal Jordan in Green Lantern like 5. I think that something like Daredevil would have really benefited from a year of that, where instead of seeing new stories about the Daredevils, we saw minor new adventures of the two Daredevils interspersed with classic adventures. I think that would have been transformative.
Yeah, I like that idea.
All right. So
speaking of transformative, Ali Galactic, you ready?
It's time to ultimatize.
Yep.
And I'm gonna say
give the grade for. Let's go grades first.
B.
Okay.
I love the art. I love the storytelling. Fuck the limited acceptance of the market that this wasn't just presented as a manga. When we're talking about the number of panels per page and the number of words per page, the way they dictate the way a story is read, you are literally talking about different mediums. Any of Studio 60 fans, it's putting Final Draft on the wrong setting. And so I feel like this should have just been a fucking manga. And like 2/3 fuck you for being such an unaccepting marketplace that wouldn't have let that happen. The panels are too big for the page. The art is stunning. And if I were holding this at full size, I'd be fucking annoyed. Glad I read it digitally. The storytelling is so cool. The taut fear. This is taut fear. Like TAUT, not like TAUGHT fear. Like one's societal, one is like, I can't breathe. This was great, but man, I just felt like, okay, can I say the dark part now? The part that really holds it back?
Sure.
No one else is going to draw these characters this way. So when I see them appear in other titles, they're not going to be this magical. They're not going to be this special. They're not going to have this vibrant iteration.
Yeah.
So if this were its own title, A plus.
Yeah.
I'd buy every issue. But as an Ultimate title, where I know that Hickman, I know the weight of Hickman's shadow costs more than any other writer's paycheck. It's just not the same.
Again, Marvel, think outside the box. Like, we got to do stuff differently. We're in this weird holding pattern and it sucks. I think this being Ultimate X-Men released as a manga along with the 3 as normal titles could have been really fun. Because the fact of the matter is, when we get into if this is going to stick, if this universe is going to stick, and we're going to have a team called the X-Men that looks like the Ultimates, which is coming up, that looks like Spider-Man's world, which is starting to form into the Spider-Man's world that we know, it's not going to be Peach Momoko forever. I think maybe not for long. So when it is this crystallizing moment, and I designed today's content, I said specifically we're putting this in solo titles, even though this is Ultimate X-Men, because we know this is just about Hisako in this first issue. We'll be getting Maystorm in a little bit, and I think we'll put together a cute little X-Men team. But I don't think they are going to be the Ultimate X-Men for decades to come if we're going to be doing a decade or more of this Ultimate Universe. So in this moment where we have Peach Momoko, who is a unique storyteller, who comes from a tradition that is not really full-page comics as we know them, maybe this is a time to play around with medium a little bit and give something that can honor the art, but also recognize this is a little bit standoffish. This is a little bit unique. This is a little bit separate from everything else that is happening. And that's also true just in the storytelling, no matter what. Like, how does this you get the intro of, like, Maker came over to this universe and he stopped superheroes from ever happening, and now he's stuck in the bubble. So what's going on? This basically in issue 1 has nothing to do with that. In Spider-Man issue 1, he is like, I am not Spider-Man. I'm older Peter Parker. Oh, now I'm becoming Spider-Man. We have no idea what this has to do with the Ultimate Universe that's coming, and that's okay. I'm happy to wait. Obviously, it'll get there at some point, but in the meantime, if this is Peach Momoko doing Peach Momoko stuff in a universe that is really relying on people playing with the Hickman fantasy, honor that. Figure out how to make that a feature, not a bug that you're working around. I think for me it is a B+, A-. It's just so cool. Hisako is a character that has not had the respect of having a lot of Japanese writers write her, and to get a version of her that is conceived of entirely by a Japanese woman of such incredible excellence at Marvel that, like, if there is a line to sign up for tickets to her meet and greet, the website crashes. You know, she is beloved by the comics fandom. And it's funny because, like, I would never have thought to do any of the Demon Days stuff as manga. But one, I actually think it would be really cool to, and two, for some reason, immediately that is what you think of with this book.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that has to do with that, like, and I don't mean this negatively, but, like, think about how many times we say, oh, classic superhero trope. You've read one, you've read them all.
Yeah.
Maybe we're just so new to Peach's personal interpretation of Eastern stories brought to Western culture that you can see those three lines, you can see those connections. I think this is different enough by virtue of its storytelling setting. But one of the things that this title does suffer from is the word X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
I wish this was called Ultimate Mutants so
Yes.
bad. Because the problem here is whether or not these are going to be the X-Men, the word X-Men is limiting. The word X-Men binds you to 1964's determination of what being edgy and cool and different is. And if you're telling me the most edgy and cool I can ever be is Peggy from Mad Men. That's fine. But I think the world deserves everybody getting better than that. You know what I mean? And like breaking free of that word X-Men, breaking into mutants. Number one, I love the gendering of mutants being not just men, not just women. It allows for non-binary folk into this argument. It does not define it in gender. Beyond that, it reminds us that the only thing that unites a community is what they choose to be united by. And I might not see everything in common with every person in the queer spectrum, but there is, as long as they're not hateful, there's room for them in the queer spectrum. And X-Men, exactly as Ali Galactic says, is so loaded as heck, and it sets certain expectations. It means you have to be a certain kind of person. You have to be one of Xavier's people. And this is not about Xavier's people. This is about Peach Momoko exploring new ideas in mutant culture as they emerge through the idea of somebody with Eastern influences. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed a lot of it, and I like this is kind of like turning into a product development meeting. I love that you're, that Peach. I love that
you're
the
here. ROI, guys.
I love that you want to do, a story for us. I like the product idea of the mutant. I was kind of trying to do a riff on like what that would look like, but it does just feel like, who is in these rooms? Who is pitching ideas? What are they pitching? Why are they pitching it? I tweeted earlier today, I feel really silly if I'm ever like, Marvel and DC are doing it wrong, and here's why, and here's how I know, and they don't, because they have marketing teams, they have focus group data, they have trend forecasting, they have money. I have none of these things. I do not know what I'm talking about. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and I never say any of this stuff with the authority of, I know I'm right and I know they're doing it wrong. But there are a lot of times where it doesn't feel right. And it just, something feels off. And maybe everything is going according to the plan that they have for how they want to publish this stuff and make the money they're going to make and release the products they're going to release. I am not receiving it well. And for me, that's all I can do is just kind of is look at that and give that. It might be broadly, objectively for a bunch of people working out great, but this is, I think, a fantastic example of, I love the core creativity here. Again, love the love the product, hate the package that it came in. And I think, us just sitting here talking, we're developing an even better package, just spitballing ideas.
I agree. And, I think both of us are reflecting what Ali Galactic has said here. I will say that I loved the issue. I liked the characterization of Hisako. I loved how earnestly and thoughtfully it dealt with survivor guilt around the kinds of death that is implying. I loved the art. I'm very interested in seeing where it goes. And in my heart, in my heart, I know the market isn't going to accept the book and it's not going to last long. I am disappointed to feel roughly the same.
The only caveat I'll give is, if the Ultimate Universe lasts long, Ultimate X-Men will be a part of it. Peach Momoko writing this kind of Ultimate X-Men will, you are correct, not last long.
It's going to be, at any given point, they're going to bring in, like, Brian Wood back out of fucking obscurity, and they'll get, like, Temujin, and, Temujin won't know what he's drawing, but he'll draw for Brian Wood. And
I mean, my first thought is, like, it's Steve Orlando, and it's, I mean, like, if you want to give me a big hitter to, like, impress people, it's RB Silva. If you want to give me, a classic to draw in the old fans, it's Chris Bacalo. But probably it's the person that worked with.
It's going to be Phil Noto.
Oh, Phil Noto would act. That I was going to say the person that did Marauders, that the Orlando Marauders, where the art was very.
Yeah. Rain
I keep wanting to say Emiliana Torini, but that is a singer. Yeah,
you are right.
And it's somebody like that where it's nothing bad about it at all, but just a very different take on Eleonora Carlini. See, I was kind of right with, nothing bad about that creative team, just starkly different from what Peach Momoko does and what the implications of Peach Momoko doing that in the flagship first issue of a new universe's version of the X-Men that's as far away from house and house style and house rules as you can get. And that sort of creative team I'm pitching after just feels like, okay, now let's bring this whole thing back to Earth before the mothership flies away.
And that is even part of the concern here. Isn't the plot of the Ultimate Universe that in like 3 months it's going to reset or whatever? Isn't each one of these titles going to get 12 issues and then be done? Isn't that like the functional design we're looking at? So I find myself a little concerned because, exactly as Ali Galactic says, honestly, Peach Momoko deserves the world. And I know her plans for this are going to be an amazing time, but the mainstream comic market is not going to go with this book at all. Mainstream readers won't accept the book on the terms that, and this one absolutely requires you to do that in order to enjoy it. Also, Tori sounding like Bowser in the middle of the Mario movie just shouts Peach, right? And I feel the same way. I also just shout Peaches. But the thing I want to highlight here is that's why I wish this was just a manga, because if it was a manga, it would almost force you confrontationally to accept the nature of bias. But by keeping it in a comic book, it just looks funny. I just don't like it. And that's going to be what every fanboy says. Even the ones who probably really like manga. There is something that is too genuine about this. There is something that is almost Uncanny Valley about it, right? I'm sorry, Ultimate Valley, wrong universe. So the thing that I am most excited for about this book is how it's going to, in the long run, reshape comics forever. I don't want to give it too much credit, because if you say its name, it summons it in a dark god kind of way. But NYX did go on to reshape the way the Marvel Universe would work for the next 20 years, and there's really nothing any of us can do to fight that.
Yeah. Honestly, I thought he was onto something with NYX. I just thought that he didn't write it well.
No, that is not Joey Q's finest moment. No.
But I thought there was a lot of good ideas there. And again, for me, as somebody who read it at the time and was a little too young to be thinking critically enough, and sort of, that was one of those ones where, like, at the time I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I had to kind of go back and reflect and be like, this is not cool at all. But I will say, seeing Kaiden Nixon, this character who is just a kind of candy flipping scumbag who is not an X-Man, show up at the far ass end of the darkest timeline future as the core heart of Strife's horrifying temporal engine. That's great comics right there. And so, there are always those moments to be had.
Speaking of moments to be had, one of the things that I am really excited about is the possibility that this may open the idea that Marvel could entertain Peach Momoko doing her kind of work on a mainstream Marvel title. The parallel that this leads me to is, I don't want to be rude to an entire industry and medium, but comics
kind of already done it a bunch today.
Oh, good. Comics as a whole treat women like also-rans.
Oh, yeah. That's not even rude. That's so true.
So, in talking about that, look at Gail Simone coming on to X-Men. If Gail Simone isn't writing X-Men, I will eat this hat. You know what I mean? And I feel like she would think that's hysterical and she would watch. So,
but also, it's weird as shit that we still don't know. Like, I already said this last week, and I'm going to say it every week until, I guess for the next 3 weeks, because Marvel previews will be out by the end of then for the upcoming month. But it's weird as shit that, like, they were like, Hickman, X-Men, your lives are all saved. Don't worry, Daddy's coming home to fix everything that was wrong. And then we got Hoxpox, and that was true, and it was right. But now that era is ending, and they won't tell us who's coming to save the day, but it does feel like it's Gail Simone.
And you know what? There are so few people who, on this, the eve of International Women's Day,
God bless you, Tori,
who could possibly take on modern American comics, just for a second, superhero dense, modern American comics superhero books are so dense and compressed, and manga is not. There are very few women who are given that sort of opportunity to work within the dense, compressed landscape that also works in a decompressed to the trade sense, the way Gail Simone is. And when we talk about Gail Simone, one of the things she is most notable for is women in refrigerators. She is the person who said, I'm done with this. Like, as the guy doing the Green Lantern read, as the guy who even really likes Kyle Rayner, there's nothing you can do about the fact that that is a pockmark on the history of comics forever. It is just awful. And there's nothing you can do. It is a blemish that will never be removed. And so knowing that a woman who's very soul of the way she interacts with comics she is here to, I don't know, I guess heal the damage that comics has done to women, and she's the person being given Uncanny X-Men, and her first story is about Jubilee, a young Asian woman. It makes room in my heart for the possibility that this could lead to Peach Momoko having that kind of say in the Marvel Universe before all is said and done.
I fully agree. And like, if you want to be really cynical about it, again, I just go back to the fact that like, who is forming the largest lines for their signings? It's Peach Momoko. Who do we get so excited about? It's Peach Momoko. I think she really sells, and Marvel likes that, if nothing else.
We all get very Jean Parmesan about her. Peach!
Yes.
Oh, Tori had it right. Look at that. Yeah, I really agree. One of the things that this does make me ask myself, though, is how much is Marvel willing to invest in, as Tori pointed out, the lack of a manga department, as Ali Galactic pointed out, a completely different form of storytelling in manga stories. Is Marvel testing the waters here? Let's remember that the Japanese sales on manga dwarf American sales on comics.
The American sales on manga dwarf American sales on comics.
Oh, sure. But I mean, but let's get to the actual bigger point of that. The number of people in Japan compared to the number of people in America, and manga sales eat American comic sales like it's nothing. So I want to consider that if Marvel could find a way to acceptably and believably break into the manga market.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. One of the big things, Japan is able to crank out manga a lot faster because a lot of it's not in color. And I think we would have a lot of trouble accepting black and white.
I can't tell the difference between Polaris and Jean. You have to color their hair.
Lord. But, I mean, I do think they're testing the waters. I'm so excited for the X-Men manga to come out. I'm a little bummed that it is a manga that was written 30 years ago. But we're finally getting our translation. And honestly, this is one of those things where I'm like, I know they must know better, but everybody knows manga sales are better than comic sales. Comic sales seem to be making all of the publishers of comics unhappy. Why would they not just produce manga? Go ahead. If that's what's going to get us better stories and better production, I would so much rather go to manga getting produced and then digital stuff as well. I don't know. I don't have the exact model in my head right now, but I hope this is Marvel really getting serious about testing the waters. I would rather they stay open and stay afloat and switch formats than stay in this format that it kind of seems like they hate. It just seems like it makes them miserable.
And that's the nature of the entire situation going on with comics. That's part of what makes manga so successful. You can have manga strips in manga magazines.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the whole other thing too, is like there are so many manga magazines. And that's how most Japanese people end up reading a lot of stories, is 1 week at a time in an anthology.
And then it gets collected.
Right.
And so, I think Marvel really has to look at the model. When Disney says, we at Disney Plus look at what everyone else is doing, and then we just have a few more dollars, so we do it better. I need them to do that with Marvel. They need to go look at manga and say, oh, we're doing comics so stupidly, and then, catch up and do them a little bit better. On the whole, this is actually one of my more favorite positive episodes. I think I can give this whole episode like a B+. This was a really positive, exciting episode.
Yeah, that's why I was excited to do some solo titles, because I think in a lot of ways some important work is being done with the solo books, and I think some great creators are taking the time to really focus individually on characters rather than getting stuck having to carry the weight of a team and the implications of that team. In some cases it's an entire people. And I just think that's a little tough. So, we're going to do another round of solo titles that I'm super excited about. Stuff like Captain Marvel and, Immortal Thor. Is Thor immortal?
Yeah.
He's immortal. He's not invincible.
And also it's one of those ones where immortal should not go with his name, because it kind of sounds like immortal.
Yeah. Yes. And then, of course, we got to talk about Spider-Man Fake Red.
Can't wait to talk about Spider-Man Fake Red. I can't wait to talk about everything going on with the kind of not exactly fall and rise of X stuff going on over in the pages of Blood Hunt, where we know a number of those characters are getting one-shots and minis. So we know some of the relaunch work, and then at the same time we have some of those characters appearing in things like Spider-Woman's story in the Women of Marvel. So there's just so much going on. And okay, I'm so glad it came back up. I want to interact. So Tori said, what if we took a while off to do Peach's Hoxpox? I would also really love to see that. I think one of the things that made Hoxpox so good was that it was born of so many years of angst. And I want her to do that, but I want them to give her a chance to also tell her giant size and her new X-Men so that it chonks harder. I want the weight of it to crush me. You don't want to have sex with Wilson Fisk when he's at his tiniest. You know what I mean? You want him to lay on you. And so I want Peach Momoko to lay this on me. I can't do it anymore. But I want that grand design level of surrender to the excellence. Yeah. Not that I think everything in grand design is excellent, but absolutely nothing in grand design was concerned with doing what you wanted.
It is one comprehensive vision. And that's something, Ed Piskor has it, Peach Momoko has it. Even somebody like Jonathan Hickman does not have it because he doesn't do his own art. What?
Both of us.
Oh yeah, we do.
He's my Magneto. He's my Galactus. He's my Doctor Doom.
Magneto is my Magneto, but I do love Wilson. He is a very large man. He shoulder presses 500 pounds. And also his really hot fuckable wife does.
Perfect.
So we're in great company. She's also my favorite. Not canonically, but Jewish queen. Come on.
No judgment.
Give me time. I'm going to get there.
Yeah, we are some nasty boys. It's full Minneapolis funk here. So, okay, let's wrap this bad boy up. It has been such a pleasure. I've really loved these titles. One of the things that this sort of format where you're cultivating these amazing episodes out of concepts that you're putting together, looking at solos, teams, titles, etc. One of the things that this really affords us is an opportunity to see those connective threads. Coming to realize the way that Captain America and the Sentry have so much in common was transformative of my reading process after the fact. At the same time, coming to realize that I feel like both Daredevil and Ultimate X-Men, 2 titles written by women focusing on female identities, are disadvantaged by the marketplace, has been a really important thing to realize why my grade is based on discouragement, not disinterest. So I've just had a great time. TK, what are your your big parting thoughts before we close this big guy out?
I kind of really got into it when I was talking about how I love seeing great creators get some time with specific characters rather than having to do the entire relationship between Scott and Jean and how Emma's involved and Logan's involved and Cable's the kid. Really getting to just focus on Captain America, his childhood, his hopes for his own life as it is. And you still can bring in a big cast of characters, but that's different than an X-Men, than an X-Force, than an Avengers,
then even an Excalibur or a Thunderbolt.
Or Defenders. Even a Thunderbolts. Yeah.
3 things
that Thunderbolts book
constantly.
is not Bucky's book.
No.
It is everybody's book. Even though Bucky is sort of your through line character, that is dealing with a bunch of stuff. And I love that Thunderbolts book. Don't get me wrong. We still need team books, but I'm loving, I loved getting to see all of these creators take one character and just really go in depth in a variety of different ways. That was a real treat. I think there's a lot to be learned both from creatively from those stories and from reading all those, but then also from everything that we were talking about in terms of here's an example of why, even though the story is fantastic, Daredevil doesn't work as Daredevil Gang War 4 issues that will never be discussed again. Ultimate X-Men maybe has some formats that might work better for it. That these are not all just perfect experiences, I think is a good thing, because it means that, my joy in this whole process is not just the critiquing and the discussion, but also as a creative person and somebody who's, has my own projects, sort of understanding how I might apply some of what I'm hearing here to thoughts that I have about my own work.
I love that. Speaking of people who do amazing work and the ways that this might influence them, Kevo, was there anything you heard in today's episode where you're like, ooh, or like, ooh, or like, ooh?
I think more of the general sentiment of just waiting to see what the next phase of comics is, which is a recurring theme that I feel like we are hearing on this show right now. Something I want to draw attention to real quick that we didn't discuss, but just to point out a lot of the ships that are going on in the X-Men universe right now, they released the episode list for X-Men 97.
Yeah.
So there's so much going on all across the sphere, everything with Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. There's so many things that they're really throwing a lot at the wall with the X-Men. And I'm really, 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 we have no idea what the state of the X-Men is going to be at the end of 2024 right now. In some ways it's exciting. In some ways it's terrifying. But there's definitely a lot. It looks like a lot of good on the horizon, at least. There's a lot of great things. I'm super excited to see how things from comics will potentially cross over into the MCU, like Elektra. So it's just a really cool time.
I love that. And Kevo, thank you for producing the hell out of this show. It is 2 hours where you do some of your best work on a topic you only have the most general knowledge on. Not that you are unknowledgeable, but you don't know the specifics, and yet you move those images left and right like you do. And it's amazing every single week, and we couldn't do it without you. So until next time. Oh, also, for the record, word.
Aw, thanks.
Kevo, you rule.
Stop.
I'll stop. I also want to say, if any of our amazing participants like Tori, Ali Galactic, if you guys ever want to share your amazing social media so that people can follow along with you, please feel free to, but please don't feel pressured in the least. But while you guys make that decision, Kevo, where can everybody find you at home? Wait, no, nobody finds you at home. I live there. Where can everybody find you online?
You can find me at home taking care of this guy down here. He needs it. He's working hard, and frankly, you gents are a pleasure to produce. I love doing this show with you guys, and you can find me over on the Soch at Kevoreally. That's KEVOREALLY. And where can we find you lovely gentlemen, our amazing hosts, starting with you, Mr. Teak?
You can find me at TK Elemental. Nico, how about you? Where can everybody find you?
You guys can find me at Nico Action on the socials. That's NICOACTION. Search YouTube, search SoundCloud, search Twitter, search your heart, search your soul. You guys can find me there under Nico Action. It's very exciting. And as always, you guys can find us with this amazing board of unbelievable new material that we can't wait to bring you. We've got some very exciting sci-fi Saturdays and lots of reality TV nonsense Sundays and way more comics on Wednesdays, plus a lot of surprises coming your way in the next couple of months, and we cannot wait to bring all of that to you. But until next time, like, comment, subscribe, bam! Okay, next thing we need you guys to do. Number one, stay safe, spooky world, scary place, but keep on being awesome. And number two, we want you guys to be brave because it's a weird world, but if you be brave, you can stay safe at the same time. We'll get to see you guys evolve daily because who you are today is amazing, but who you're going to be tomorrow is even better. And until then, check us out, X is for show, and we'll see ya.